Can everyone hear us okay?
Yes.
Bobby, good to see you. Thanks for being with us today. All right, Jerry, I think we're good to go. We're good to go on audio. We got the agenda up, and whenever we're ready to go, if we want to wait a couple more minutes to let people slip in.
Yeah, let's give people a couple more minutes. When we do introductions.
Yes. Yes.
Slow.
Oh, I just want to drag it to the top. Right, yeah.
Yeah, if we can just use that. Yeah. Scroll down.
Yep.
All right, I guess the clock here in the meeting room is a little slow, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Jerry Peterson. Thanks everybody for attending this afternoon. We do appreciate your time. The agenda is on the screen. Don't want to read this every time, but I want to make sure that people understand what our goal is here, what the collaborative is all about. Before we get into the legislative update, I wanted to do a quick round of introductions. Again, I'm Jerry Peterson with Home Energy Services, a local company here in Boise, and I've agreed to help facilitate these meetings and make every attempt to stay neutral on it so that we can have a fair conversation back and forth. And with that, let's start over here.
I am Maureen O'Shea with Idaho Department of Water Resources. I work the National Flood Insurance Program for the state.
I'm Peter Jackson with Idaho Division of Water Resources. I'm the state floodplain manager, new to the job, so I just started.
Okay. And I'm Lance from Association of Cities. Peter, good to see you guys. Thanks so much for being here. I'm the environmental energy policy analyst. Great to be with you guys today. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Dawn Hall with AIC. I'm Susan Cleverly with the Idaho Office of Emergency Management and Litigation Protection. The projects that we help fund throughout the state have to meet building codes and certain standards. Yeah.
Damon Woods with University of Idaho Integrated Design Lab.
Dana Muskevich, AIC.
And we'll go to the online participants. We'll start with you, Rob. Rob?
Hey, my name's Rob Brooks with Rob Brooks and Associates.
And Jeffrey Wardle?
Jeff Wardle with Clark Wardle LLP here in Boise, and I'm also on BOMA International's Executive Committee.
Thanks for being here today. Blake?
Hey all, I'm Blake Ringeisen. I'm a Codes and Standards Engineer at NEA, the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance.
Bobby?
Bobby Kaufman with Clearwater County Building and Planning Department.
Chad?
Chad Blanco with AIA Idaho.
David? Freeland?
Dave Freelove, Idaho Energy Code Circuit Rider.
Jason?
Jason Blaze with City of Boise.
Jenny? Larson?
Go ahead. Jenny Larson with Clearwater County. I'm the building official. My speaker on my laptop's not working, so I'm using Bobby's.
Thank you. Catherine?
I'm Catherine Leha. I'm with CSHQA. They're located in Boise, but I work out of Twin Falls.
Thank you. Cody?
Cody Thompson with Intermountain Gas Company.
Laura?
My name is Laura Davidson. I'm on I'm an officer for AIA Central Idaho.
And Lindsay?
Sorry, I'm Lindsay Love. I'm with AIA Idaho.
Mark?
Yeah, Mark Lyles. I'm with the Pacific Northwest National Labs and work as part of the Building Energy Code program.
Thanks for joining us today, Mark.
Happy to be here.
Hi, everybody.
Tess?
Oh, sorry. Tess?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tess Studley with Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance.
We get Tim Johnson.
And Tim?
Yeah, Tim Johnson, Cushing Terrell, and also ASHRAE Idaho president.
Thanks for being here, Tim.
Thank you.
We have a very diverse group here today. As we get into the presentation, what we were going to do today was just an overview, kind of go through the different sections. I will try to address any clarifying questions, but I'm not sure we have enough time to get down into the details. I will have Lance mail out the PowerPoint after today's meeting, and so everybody will have that. I did include the chapter reference numbers on every one of the line items, and hopefully that will assist people with their comments. And well, as we go through it today, you can just make a note of the reference numbers if you want. And then at the next and following meetings, we'll be going into those items a little more specific or as needed. I'll talk more about how we're going to interact with the building code board. So with that, I want to turn over to Lance for a few minutes and have him give us a legislative update on ZBR, the zero-based regulations, and also a couple of things that were brought up as those rules were going through their committees. Turn it over to Lance.
Yeah, so for those that weren't able to follow it, we were in attendance just recently. The Idaho Senate had a hearing to discuss some of these ZBR rules in regards to the energy code. We walked through that, and in case you didn't get a chance to follow it, I've published it on our website. It's also linked in this agenda, so you can go back and look at the agenda on page 351, going over those administrative rule changes. There wasn't anything in particular, most likely that we would be talking about today. They did talk about some fire sprinkler issues, specifically in condo type setups. They are working on some legislation on that part right now. There's a couple of other energy code things kind of being discussed, more along the lines of the city of Boise being able to put electrical charging stations. Again, not sure if that's something we'll want to really dig into today, but those are really the only two items so far that we've seen come through the legislature that kind of touches what we're working on. There wasn't much pushback on what was being put forward as far as the changes being recommended in order to help condense the rules. The committee, at least that we attended on, were fairly receptive to those changes. So we'll just continue to monitor those and see how things change, or see if there's maybe absent amendments. I'm guessing that most of the focus will be on legislation as opposed to the rules, but I'll make sure to keep you guys updated if there are any other changes.
Thank you. Any questions on the ZBR or legislative update? I'm going to proceed with the building code board. They had a meeting on February 20th. just a couple of things that were on their agenda. They did not get into the energy code at this meeting. They discussed, reviewed and discussed the 2021 Idaho Residential Code, or excuse me, International Residential Code and the International Building Code. And they did it in a similar format to what we're going to be doing today. They hadn't developed the energy code presentation yet, and so I've agreed to furnish that to them so that you don't have to duplicate that process. And hopefully they'll, we'll keep those two aligned so that, all of our comments can be presented in either format. If you look at their agenda for February 20th, you'll see an energy code collaboration possible dates on there. There, again, we kind of use this collaborative in a generic format. What that means from their perspective is there are items in the energy code that affect other boards. And so anything that's in there that is mechanical or electrical, they want to be able to present that to the respective boards to make sure that they're aware of what those changes are and that they're on board with them. And so that's an internal thing that they're doing. I don't know what that meeting format is or if those dates are open, but how they done it previously was kind of got together with the board chairs. And so instead of having an open meeting for the electrical board, they get all of the chairs together at that time and say, this is what is in the changes. And it's more so that everybody knows what's happening and can follow, have input on it. So that's what that particular line item is. There was a short and good presentation on concrete masonry walls. And this is one item in our energy codes regarding insulation on those. And we will be in contact with the gentleman that did that presentation and try and schedule it so that he can come here and do it. It's a fairly short presentation, but it's something that Washington and Oregon have both provided additional language in their codes to allow for. And so that's kind of the essence of that particular meeting. Lance, did you publish the dates? We will make sent those to Tess. We'll make the building code board dates available as part of our meeting so that if people are interested in attending those, they'll know when the dates are. You can also find them online if you just do a general search on Idaho Building Code Board and check meetings. It'll take you right to their meeting dates. Their next meeting is in April. We're hoping to have, we will have another meeting prior to that where we're starting to look into the specifics. And so we will have a presentation for the Building Code Board at their April meeting. And they will, at that point, probably start to review the energy code as part of their process. Any questions related to the Building Code Board? Okay. And so as we're going through this PowerPoint, again, just want to remind everybody, copy of this was made available after the meeting, unless there is significant edits or things that I may have missed that are brought to my attention. But the the intent is to get this out to everybody after today's meeting. The resources for this presentation are all out of the 2021 ECC, the Energy Code Significant Changes book. It does not include all of the changes. This is what ICC has determined as significant. If you are looking for related material or you want a bigger picture look at some of these changes, remember that the codes are available online. Just do a search on 2021 ICC Energy Code, and it'll take you right to their site. You can do a line item review of the 2021 code. I've tried to put a few of the tables on there kind of as an example of some of the changes, but this is not all of the tables listed. And then anything is highlighted in blue are the new changes. This may sound kind of like a shortcut, but based on our prior experience, we tried to line item present the code before, and it didn't work. It was way too time consuming. So it's kind of easier to just do a helicopter view of it, a highlight presentation, and kind of narrow it down a little bit and shorten the time frame. We're not trying to avoid anything. It's just a faster way to kind of go through it. If you have comments, please, click on the button, type it in, and Lance will be watching for comments. I will try to answer any clarifying questions. So if somebody wants to know why something is the way that it is, I'm happy to look at the book here in front of me and to try to clarify that. But we're really not going into, simply don't have time to get into the minutiae of it today. We're going to start with the commercial section, and we'll watch the clock a little bit. It's about probably a 50-50 split between commercial and residential. So when we finish up the commercial, we'll take a short break, let everybody stand up, move around a little bit. And I will, as we're going through this, I'll try to stop a few times and see if anybody has questions. So it starts out, the way the code is put together, it starts out with administration. There's a couple of minor adjustments there. The first one allows for digital plans. Previously, plans had to be, as it was stated in codes, plans had to be submitted in their full format. This clarifies that digital plans are allowed. The second one is the addition of energy compliance path as part of the construction documents being submitted. There are some new definitions, and those are here. And this are all definitions, so these aren't changes.
I wouldn't think it's two. I think he's.
It's weird though how they'll.
Those definitions continue. There is 5 new areas, definitions of fan efficiencies. And then we get into the general requirements. One of the more substantial changes are in the climate zone definitions. And in the commercial, this was done to correspond with the ASHRAE requirements that have been in place for a while. And it's worth noting that about 10% of the counties were assigned a warmer climate zone. So this is something to be aware of. There were no changes in Idaho as for our counties. None of our counties were relisted. And so this doesn't affect Idaho, but it may affect areas around us. We do have people that work in other states. And so just be aware that there were some changes in the counties. were also some changes in definitions for the architects, engineers in the room. There was some additional clarification, thermal criteria. I won't pretend to know what all of this means. I have a pretty good idea. This is kind of outside of my scope. But the changes were made in climate zones 5 in Idaho. And then there was some changes in the commercial energy provisions in the compliance path, and just kind of how that was restructured. And so there is now a prescriptive and a total building performance. And this carries over into the residential, where we used to call it a UA or a res check. There was a couple of other things. So we'll cover that some more in residential. And so when you're looking at pathways, you either do the ICC, prescriptive compliance, or total building compliance, or you do ASHRAE. You can't blend those. You have to pick one pathway and do your compliance path under that format. There's also a requirement for a energy efficiency certificate, and this is similar to what is currently been required in residential. And so this is something that has to be done and posted. It's just a sample. People can develop their own. The big thing they want on both commercial and the residential is they want to know the compliance pathway and the codification. So it's kind of tough when we go back in later and we're doing remodels or equipment change outs. We don't know what the building was done off of, not doing quite a bit of research. And this way we can just look at the certificate. Okay, this was the code in place at the time. The R value did change, some of them significantly. Most of that was in climate zone 4 to 8. Idaho is in climate zones 5 and 6. And again, these were to closer align with the values that we've been using in ASHRAE 90.1. I know this is hard to read. I won't go through this line item, but I just wanted to show you the quantity of the blue. And so climate zones 5 and 6 are kind of in the middle there. And you can see that they changed almost everything in climate zones 5 and 6. So be aware of that. And insulation, U factor and R value are in an inverse. Basically, it's the same tables, but for those that use the total performance, they would be using U factor. So these tables basically to say the same thing, but you know, how you're doing the design. There were significant changes in the roof assembly, insulation, and several new sections added there. So just be aware that there are now specific requirements dealing with the insulation and how it's laid out, staggering joints, minimum thicknesses, things like that. This is above and below the roof ceiling. Most of this on this page is above deck insulation. There were also changes to the U factor and solar heat gain coefficient requirements. This is I think, a good move. For a long time, we didn't have solar heat gain requirements for residential. I'm not sure how much this has changed in commercial, but you'll see that every one of these values has changed in climate zones 5 and 6. There was also additional clarifications on air barriers, 5 new sections there, and a requirement for performance verification at the bottom. So as part of that verification, we have to tell them what compliance options we are designing to, and then be able to verify that. There were also some additional language for dwelling and sleeping unit enclosure testing and the building thermal envelope testing. There's some new language on operable openings. These are typically similar to like an overhead garage door for restaurants and stuff where they open out onto a sidewalk or a seating area. And they don't always have controls that affect the HVAC. And so you're opening these large space areas and then trying to air condition or heat space that's left over. So there is new language for how that has to be designed, but that's the intent. As those areas are opened up, bleeding condition area, open spaces. Before I get into the mechanical section, is there any questions so far? Questions, comments? I know this is fun stuff. I appreciate everybody's attentions.
Gary,
Yes.
I do have one question. On biomass, is that for the creation or the expended biomass?
It is just a definition of what biomass is. And the same with all four of those requirements. It just defines what, for code purposes, what does that mean? I would read it to you, but it's a page.
Okay.
But these are the kind of questions as we start delving into specifics, if people have questions and they want to know what that's. This is what we're going to be doing in our teaching meetings. Thank you.
Sure, question of clarification on the envelope testing sleeping units. It looks like there's a new requirement. Air leakage.
What is the
C 405 or 402.5?
Thank you.
Installation of continuous air barriers should be verified by code official. 402.5.1, and then followed up with for dwelling and sleeping unit enclosures shall be tested in accordance with ASTM so 9 for an equivalent method to measure air leakage. But this seems like a significant change for Idaho apartments.
Do I have my code reference wrong on this one? I will edit that. Okay. Oh, I know what I'm doing. Which one's making sense? I'm in the wrong book. Here we go. Okay, what was the specific again? Requirements verification.
Yeah, for dwelling and sleeping unit enclosures. Now there's a requirement for testing. For buildings have fewer than 8 units, each unit shall be tested. For buildings 8 or more, 20% of the units should be tested. Specific location. So I'm correct in understanding that's a new requirement.
It is. Yes, all of the language in that chapter is new. And the same with the building thermal envelope testing, that whole chapter is new. Sorry.
No, thanks.
As is the section on the performance verification. And that just says that the installation of the continuous air barrier shall be verified by the code official, registered design professional, or approved agency. So they just want additional documentation. Somebody looked at it and verified that it was as designed. Any other questions on that before we get into the mechanical sections? So as we start in the mechanical systems, these are the items that the other board want to be aware of. They want to make sure that that we don't have overlap the enforcement aspect of it, because this was the whole purpose of, or a big part of the zero-based regulation was to make sure we're not duplicating and or that we actually have the authority to do this enforcement. So what I've been working with the building code board is we just make sure that they're aware that these are the mechanical requirements, these are electrical requirements, and make sure that they're aware of where that goes will be decided later. So there are some changes to ventilation fans, fan efficiencies. This is one of the tables for low capacity fans. And again, these are in reference to commercial. And then on the electrical power and lighting systems, they are now requiring occupant sensors in warehouse storage areas, some additional controls in parking garages. The lighting for plant growth was a big item. This is just, we're looking through the notes and stuff as part of the reasoning for this. The plant growth can be everything from weed farms to indoor greenhouses and stuff. And this is a big growing industry and can account for up to 45% of power generation in some areas. So it's huge. And so they're looking at ways to improve the efficiencies in that. And then there is an automatic receptacle control as part of that particular section. Energy monitoring is another method of trying to improve efficiency, knowing what's using what, kind of how to separate it from the general load. In your house, we don't do this. There are systems that are capable of doing it, but it would be nice to know how much your air conditioner runs, how much your appliance uses. We just get the total load, and imagine doing that on a commercial scale. We have each facility. It'd be nice to know what the components are using. Otherwise, we don't have a clear picture how to look where those efficiencies are. So these are the categories in there that they've broken these in-use metering down to. You can review that. There is also on top of those requirements that we just went over, there is an additional efficiency requirements. And this is both in the commercial and residential, although they're stated a little bit different in the commercial. So in new buildings, you're required to, in addition to your compliance pathway, you also have to provide 10 additional credits. And there is a fairly lengthy chart that explains, I tried to list that out, but was not able to put all of that, get it into a reasonable space. So, and then for tenant spaces, there is a 5 credit, and they both have separate tables for, you know, what you can put, what you can pull those credits from. And there is the believe should be on the next slide. Yeah. So there are 6 tables related to occupancy type. And here is a list of the different items that are available. And so some of these change from the different tables. These are the kind of the areas you can pick the credits from. So the credits vary depending on the occupancy, which of these you're picking, and you can pick more than one. In the total building performance, so this is another pathway. There are requirements, there are minimum requirements. And so here is a list of all of the minimum requirements. So these all have to be met. And the sections, the relative sections are listed there. And we're about 40 minutes into it. Let's take a quick break. Let's take 5 minutes. So we'll come back at 1:42 and start again.
We just send me right now. We're good to go.
Thanks, everybody. Hopefully that was enough time. Before we get going again, Mark Lyles from TNL had a comment on the air testing for dwelling units. Mark, if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted, I appreciated the question, and, you know, it is, I think, a significant change from the 2021 IECC. But I served on the residential consensus committee, and just wanted to provide some context that much of that discussion was around providing a common approach to unit compartmentalization, because that's not addressed in the energy code currently as a compliance path. And it was our understanding that many jurisdictions allow unit compartmentalization as a compliance path for the air barrier testing. And we felt that without that common approach, there was too much inconsistency from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So we felt it was a step forward to provide a common approach to that method.
Thank you. On this significant changes, this is not listed on ICC's site unless you are a premium member, but they do allow a 14-day trial on that. It's free. And so you can sign up if you want to look at the significant changes without buying it. It is a good resource. And if you have questions, they do provide some of the reasoning behind it, and or, you know, if Pacific Northwest National Laboratory contributed to the information. And so there is some good information in there that will not be in the 2021 code book. So if you want a little more, you know, on kind of the whys of the changes, that's the best way to do it, is just to sign up for that free premier service, and then you can review the 2021 significant changes. We're gonna.
Can I just ask Jerry, is there anything else, Mark, you're hoping to go over with your comment?
No, that was it.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments on the commercial section? We're going to move over to residential. Also, before we start on the residential, Lance has my contact information, and I've told him it was okay to forward that. So if you have questions that are directed towards me, or if you have comments about how we're doing this, if there's ways to do it better, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm trying to do this as good as we can, but if there's a better way to do it and you want to discuss that, please don't hesitate to get a hold of me, and Lance, you can forward my contact information. Okay, residential, kind of similar in the beginning. We'll start out with administration. There's this allowance for digital plans, and then information on the construction documents. And again, this was to indicate which compliance path is on the construction documents. It's just kind of based on some recent experience. A lot of times, houses that are using the ERI methodology for compliance are submitting res checks for their initial permit. And I think that some of this is kind of what causes the confusion, because if we're using an ERI pathway, then we need to know what that score is, or what the proposed score is, versus just taking a prescriptive or a UA pathway. So they want to know, you know, in our, when we submit plans, what is our compliance pathway? Yeah. Some changes in definitions. There's new definitions for high efficacy lighting. Lamps typically refer to bulbs, are not less than 65 lumens per watt, and luminaires, which are fixtures versus bulbs, are not less than 45 lumens per watt. There is also a renewable energy certificate required, and so if you are using renewable energy as part of your energy rating index, they want to know what it is. They want more information there. The actual definition says an instrument that represents the environmental attributes of 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy, also known as energy attribute certificate. So it sounds like something that is available, but they want that made available if you're using the energy rating index, so that there's compliance pathway. Again, there were pretty significant changes in climate zones, and the residential is a little bit different in that what they were trying to do here was provide formulas and equations for areas that are not listed. This has been something we've worked with in Idaho for quite a long time, where if you're building in, say, Fairfield, an area outside of a main jurisdiction, what are you using to determine what your design criteria is? And so you can use the nearest listed airport or county data that's in the code book, but if you're outside of those areas, there's now a way to determine that or justify it. And so if you're doing something, this is particularly of interest to people that are doing heat load calculations. If you're not going to use the published location, then you have to use this equation to determine, to validate what you are asking for. We have people that are, shouldn't say persons, there are instances where people are just saying, I don't want to use the design criteria for that location, I'm going to use this instead, but they don't provide the reasoning behind it. So this gives them a pathway to get there. There are some additional compliance pathways and just some clarification. We used to call, so there's still the prescriptive. We used to have what we call a UA alternative, which was the res check. That now is called total building performance. The ERI stays the same, but we've added a tropical climate, which doesn't affect Idaho. And then they, similar to what they've done in commercial, they've added an additional energy efficiency component. So I'll show that more in detail, section 408. So regardless of the pathway that you pick, we have an additional efficiency measures now, and a kind of a checklist selection of things to pick from. And we'll go over that 408 is towards the end of residential section. There is a new energy efficiency certificate that kind of delves a little bit more into it. Gives us a little bit more detail. Again, we want to know what code edition, what compliance pathway we're using on the house. There were significant changes to the insulation and fenestration. Fenestration are windows, skylights, doors. So this is the U factor table. Remember, U factor is the inverse of R. But if you are using a total building performance, we use U factors across the board. If you're doing prescriptive, we use R values. So yeah, there are pretty significant changes in climate zones. 5, they changed the ceiling insulation and in both 5 and 6, and then the basement R values. There's a new section on basements that we need to pay attention to. There's always been questions about how do we insulate for unfinished basements. So this has some new language and a list of requirements. If you're going to use the unfinished basement exemptions, there's now a list of requirements that have to be met. The entire list has to be met for you to leave that unfinished basement. So we don't do a lot of basements here in the Treasure Valley, but it's fairly standard in the eastern side of the state, and quite a bit of it notified. So something to look at there. The air leakage testing didn't change for Idaho, even though we are currently using the checklist format versus testing. And that was a change in the zero-based regulation and rules package that just went through. And Lance emailed that out, the actual document out. So if you're curious as to what changed on the air leakage testing, most recently it's in that document that is provided to the legislature, breaks it down in detail. They did provide an exception for heated garages, and Idaho also provided a new exception for temporarily heated garages. And so the exception here in the code is for more of a permanent arrangement and it exempts the air change testing.
And I can also make sure that in the next few months send out that I highlight.
Thank you.
That's, yeah.
And you put, and that document is also on the website.
Right.
Yeah. If we're referencing documents, please make a note that these are available on the Idaho Energy Code.com website. And if you don't see what you're looking for on there, contact Lance or myself. We will try and get that posted on there. There's now a maximum of values for U factors and solar heat gain coefficients. And this sets maximum limits. So if we're using trade-offs, again, what we used to call UA alternative or total building performance, this now sets maximum limits for solar heat gain and U factors. So you can still trade stuff off, but there are limitations on that. Okay, before we get into the mechanical sections, is there any questions on residential so far? And again, on the residential, we will make sure that the DOPL, that the state is aware of changes in mechanical and electrical, so that they can review that with their respective boards. R 403.31 is clarifying language on duct installation. And we now have new values and clarity on whether the duct is outside the conditioned space, inside it. In the 2015, I believe, we started doing buried ductwork and ceiling insulation. But we didn't have the R values. So when we're doing the modeling for ERI or HERS, we didn't know what these values are. And so these have now been published. So as we're doing the modeling, we now have reference and some instructions on how that is. There's also a new testing requirement. Previously, ductwork outside or inside the conditioned space didn't have to be tested. We don't see a lot of where all of the ductwork is inside. Typically, the furnace, the equipment is outside the conditioned space. So, but as we move forward, potentially everything could end up inside conditioned space. And they're now requiring that we do a duct plaster test on everything, even if it's inside. And again, the reasonings, the kind of the definitions and reasonings for these are in this significant changes. There's also a new requirement for ventilation system testing. And this is, it doesn't, it's kind of, you know, something you need to look at. It doesn't necessarily, rephrase that. Previously, the code just said that, you know, if you had bath fans or kitchen fans, it had to meet these ratings. And we've known forever that they very rarely match up when we test them. So we can't use the ratings for compliance. They actually want it tested now. So this is, again, this is a significant change. I do have quite a bit of experience working with bath fan installations, and this is going to change the way we install them because they don't like flex and a lot of turns and stuff. So this is just something, another way to get there. They did provide an exception for kitchen range hoods. Thankfully, these are really hard to test. You can't get a flow hood on them very well. And so they did provide an exception for kitchen range hoods. If the duct is 6 inches or larger and there's no more than one 90-degree elbow, you can accept that kitchen. In the electrical, there are some additional requirements for exterior lighting, and some new requirements for interior lighting controls and exterior lighting controls. So these are all new sections in electrical power. Any questions on the mechanical or lighting? Okay. On the total building performance, there are now some proposed design parameters which should help, and some additional requirements. So these additional requirements are listed out here in sections, and it's fairly broad-based. These are all minimum requirements. There are also some changes to the compliance report, and so they've now broken this out. Some clarifying language on what the report is and what is required for the permit application, as well as a report prior to certificate of occupancy. So these are new changes. And like the total building performance, there is also some minimum requirements for the energy rating index. And so there's a list of requirements here. I'm sure they are yeah. I'm sure they're quite similar, but they are listed in separate sections, probably for reference purposes. There's also some pretty significant changes in the ERI, or the HERS score. In climate zone 5, it's went from a 61 to 55. And then climate zone 6, it went from a 61 to a 54. So this is a pretty significant change in those. This renewable energy certificate was referenced previously, but if you are doing the energy rating index approach, you do have to provide the documentation on the renewable energy certificate. And then we get into the additional efficiency options. And it must be one or more of these options. So that's enhanced envelope, which means the thermal outbuild, windows, insulation, etc. A more efficient HVAC equipment, a reduced energy use water heating system, a more efficient duct distribution, and this could be, relocating ductwork more inside or deburying it, improving that duct distribution system, and or improving the air sealing and the efficient ventilation system. So these are, you have to pick one of these options, and there's a table for each one of these. I believe that is it. So I know that's a ton of information. Hopefully it didn't put you to sleep. That's kind of the highlight effort based on the significant changes. We had some questions about the 2024, and this was also brought up in the building code board meeting. Should we be looking at the 2024? And the answer for our group and for building code board was yes. But our obligation from building code board's perspective was that we review the 2021 first. And I know they walked back a couple of the requirements on the residential. And so as we're moving this forward, I think it's important to look at those. We have a comparison sheet I will make available at the next meeting that highlights some of the changes from 21, 24, but at this point, we are not going to be doing an in-depth review of 2024. That may change depending on the wishes of this group, but I think it would be helpful and convenient to look at that modified, kind of highlighted changes between the 21 and 24, so that we're aware of that before we spend too much time on specifics. Do you guys, should we just make that available, or we talk about it at the next meeting? Probably should talk. Let's talk. Let's not get too distracted. I will make it available at the next meeting, and that'll let us kind of concentrate on what we have in front of us. So what we're asking people to do is, again, we'll have this PowerPoint shortly. Look through it, highlight things that you have questions on, make notes, and we will do our best to try to address that. Meetings, yes.
Like us to email you the questions ahead of time, so it might help focus answers, or
It sounds like that would be the appropriate thing to do, but I don't want to put myself in a position. I want the questions to be on the project, so that they, it's not fair to the group for me to try to address the specifics.
Maybe a suggestion I'd have, Jared, we could do is, the email's gonna come from me next week. So if there's anyone on the call person that wants to ask questions,
That might be helpful, and that way we can list them out and make sure they get addressed in case somebody can't make it, still have a question. So that might be a.
I have kind of a broader question size, I'm Peter Jackson with Idaho Division of Water Resources, and I'm the floodplain manager. And my interest more is on, as the codes move forward, what kind of timeline are we looking for at adoption on not only the energy code, and it may be too broad of a question, but, you know, there's obviously the building code, the mechanical code, the electrical. Is the goal that we be updating all the codes relatively along a same timeline or a parallel timeline on it?
No, great question. We touched on this at the first meeting, but I will try to give you a brief overview of the process. So the first thing that happens is the building code board announces an intent to promulgate rules. And that my understanding is they are going through that process.
Okay.
We then, it's up to the building code board to decide whether to move ahead. And we can start to introduce, we can draft language.
Right.
Right. It doesn't go into a formal rule format until later in the process. But we can start to address that. But all of that will be done on the code board. We don't touch on any of that here. And so they currently have meetings scheduled
What
in
am I doing? Okay.
June. If somebody wants to make notes real quick, I would pull this up. So the next meeting is April 11th, and all of these are at 9 o'clock. The following meeting is June 13th. Two dates in there. I have to get clarity on that.
Well, it makes sense since it's a Thursday. But to be the second Thursday of June.
Yeah, and the next one is in November. Oh, that's sorry, that's the last one. That's what I'm getting. What will happen at the June meeting is if they're going to move forward with the rules, they will schedule 2 public hearings.
Okay.
And those hearings have to be 90 days apart. And we have to be done with those prior to the end of August because the rules have to be published, submitted in August. So we do have, that's kind of why we started this process really early, was so we had an opportunity to make changes this year. Right.
Okay.
As far as the code adoption goes, there are options. We can amend the existing, we can add to it. We could adopt the next one and add or minus from that. Right. I think the board, because of how exhaustive the CDR process is, I think they're, you know, one of the discussion items was maybe if there's something that we need now, if there's something there that we want now, the line item now, modifying the 24. So right now it's all, I don't want to speak on their behalf. The conversation. And so Idaho has never been on the leading edge of code adoption. We are not, we are kind of a less regulation.
Right.
Again, I'll give myself a go. But we are, it was mentioned in the legislature that, you know, one of their goals was to become the least regulated state. I mean, that's just one person's opinion.
Right.
But that's, it just did, we want to make sure people understand what our the political atmosphere is.
Because from a floodplain management side, there are pieces in the codes that refer back to flood requirements. Some states adopt them, some don't, some exclude them. I came from one of the more regulated. Southern Nevada is probably up at the higher end on the regulatory side because of the entertainment industry for like that. But so it varies. I don't want to get too far off topic, but I'm familiar with some other environments. I've been in a lot of meetings where those discussions happen. I can't honestly tell you that I understand how they're doing it, whether it's been done on state basis or whether it's been done by local jurisdiction. Okay. But in saying all of that, I would encourage you to approach the building code board with your concerns and see if you can get some better clarification on it. But I know local jurisdictions here they have people, that's their specific jobs. And they would probably be able to answer questions better than me. No, that's good. Thank you. Bobby said that April 11th is their Idaho's regularly scheduled meeting. I don't schedule the building code board meetings. Those were done last November, I think. So I can't help you on that. But I don't think they're going to reschedule it. Any other comments? And
Jerry, I just wanted you to be aware, Jerry, so you didn't think that we were not attending on purpose. Jenny can still attend yours.
Thank you. And Chad, yes, we will email this slideshow out to everybody. And it is, I developed this. I don't have any hesitation about sharing it. And so, yes, you are free to distribute it to interested parties. And I will this afternoon send a copy to Doppel. And so they can use this format or retheme it, whatever they want. It does take time to put these together. So hopefully they'll just use this format.
And just a quick comment, Jerry, Bobby, I'll make sure in my correspondence I'm sending out to make sure to mention that the upcoming building code board meetings, I'll make sure to highlight that in the email so that way people can start planning for it now. Hopefully we can help cities to be able to kind of divide and conquer to still to attend Idaho meetings, but then also maybe to see if we can get someone, just because the fact that those building code board meetings aren't able to be viewed at a later time. But
So we just want to clarify that April building code board meeting is April 16th. Not the.
It's 12.
So the Idaho building code board meeting is April 16th. June 18th.
Right, which is different than Idaho. Not that we all don't have enough meetings to attend, right? Trying to keep them all separated.
And then the August meeting for the Idaho Building Code Board is August 20th. And that would be probably, if they're going to take action, that is probably the meeting that they're going to do it, because it would have to, they'd have to publish it and get it submitted to legislative services before the end of August. So somewhere between the June and August would be the public hearings, or they could use one of those dates as a public hearing. So that's why there's such a big gap over the summer, as to allow for those to happen. Any other questions, or is there anything that you would like on the next agenda besides the code review? Obviously, we'll try to make sure we always do legislative updates or building code updates if there's any changes or comments there. If you think of something after the meeting, please let Lance know. And we can get that scheduled. So again, thanks everybody for your time today. And,
Jerry, if I can ask one quick follow-up
Sure.
question, are we planning on it being the 28th of March is our next time we'll meet? Thursday of March, is that?
that's the schedule that we're trying to maintain. It's the last Thursday of the month, at 1 o'clock.
Okay, just wanted to make sure to confirm that.
So we've reserved this space for the next 3 months. If we need to meet after that, we can. I'll need to pick a date. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.